Hello, I'm going to rank all 416 player abilities in World of Warcraft Classic. I'm going to rank them from S tier, which is the best and most exceptional abilities, to D tier, which is borderline useless. I sorted them alphabetically, so we will start with the first spell, that is Abolish Disease. This is like the second tier to the Cure Disease ability. Gives your target a short buff that keeps dispelling disease effects. Unfortunately, diseases are not really that big of a deal in World of Warcraft Classic, so this is a C tier ability. Abolish Poison, very similar to Abolish Disease, same idea. Poisons, however, are a much bigger deal, especially in PvP against rogues. So this is a B tier ability. Ambush, one of the rogue openers, deals a truck ton of physical damage, most useful against low armor targets. Very nice ability, great also for PvE, A tier ability. Amplify Magic, I think this ability is a bit underused. There are situations in which this can be quite useful, but mages rarely use this, probably because you have to trade in blast and fireballs instead of buffing your group up. So yeah, it's a C tier ability. Ancestral Spirit, one of the resurrection abilities, does the same thing as all the other resurrection abilities, nothing exciting, C tier ability. Aquatic Form, this is like the water version of Travel Form. Unfortunately, there's very little water-based content in World of Warcraft Classic, so very few uses. It has its applications for like herbalism, farming. There are some thorium veins in the Shara that you can very effectively farm with this. So it has its uses, C tier ability. Arcane Brilliance. This is the group version of the Arcane Intellect buff. Same idea, you just give your group base stat Intellect. Not too exciting, useful obviously, C tier ability. Arcane Explosion, one of the earliest damage AoE spells in the game. Beautiful ability, one of the hallmarks of Mage, A tier ability. Arcane Intellect, same as Arcane Brilliance, yeah, just a single target version, C tier ability. Arcane Missiles, a bit of a meme given how underrepresented Arcane Mages are in Classic. Very useful in PvP though, for spell pushback and line of sighting. So I still give this a B tier ability. Arcane Resistance, that is one of the hunter abilities that you train your pets, so I'm not gonna review any of these going forward. Arcane Shot, one of the first hunter ranged special attacks you get, one of the few you have throughout the game. Nothing special about it, it just deals a bit of arcane damage. Yeah, it's like a C tier ability. Aspect of the Beast, makes your hunter untrackable. Borderline useless, almost never used, D tier ability. Aspect of the Cheetah, this is the first S tier ability. Incredibly powerful, sometimes called Aspect of the Cheater. Just really strong. Beautiful ability. I mean, no one will disagree with this. S tier. Aspect of the Hawk. When talented, it becomes quite nice. On its base, it's just a bit of attack power. I mean, it has its uses obviously, one of the most used aspects in the game, so B tier ability. Aspect of the Monkey. This is a C tier ability. Very few situations in which you actually want to use Aspect of the Monkey. If you are dead zoned as a hunter and you are forced into melee, obviously you might use it. Outside of that, not that useful, C tier ability. Aspect of the Pack. This is the group version of Aspect of the Cheetah. I don't want to give this an S tier just because it's not as often used and it has its disadvantages, making everyone in the group dazable. So still a very strong ability. I would give this an A tier. Aspect of the Wild, the last of the aspects. Basically a nature protection aura, not that exciting, has its uses, it's like a C tier ability. Astral Recall, this is basically putting your Hearthstone on a 15-minute cooldown when you are a shaman. Useful of course, but nothing special, C tier ability. Autoshot, hardly even considered a special ability, but of course it is a special ability. Other classes outside of the Hunter do not have this. We might have to give this an S tier just because that this is absolutely necessary for the Hunter class. If they didn't have that, Hunter would be absolutely horrendous to play. So it's kind of in the background, but Autoshot, S tier ability. Backstab. Somewhere between S tier and A tier. I want to give this an S tier ability just because it's probably the most used rogue ability in raiding if you play a subtlety rogue. Yeah, beautiful ability. Dagger rogue, I should have said. S tier. Banish has its uses, especially in Molten Core. No one is excited by Banish, however. Yeah, it's like a C tier ability. Barkskin. I would say this is a B tier ability. Can be quite strong to prevent pushback. 20% fist flight reduction is nothing to scoff at. Yeah, has its uses. Quite strong in PvP situationally. So yeah, I would give Barkskin a B tier. Bash, the Druid bear form stun. I mean, it's a stun ability. Any CC abilities in the game usually will end up in the middle of the pack here. B tier ability. Battle Shout, the warrior buff. Buffs, on the other hand, are usually rather on the low end because they're not really that exciting. This one has the added disadvantage of lasting 2 minutes, very annoying. It's like a C tier ability. Battle Stance. This is a bit like Autoshot, I suppose, just that this is even more in the background. Really hard to judge this. Maybe we shouldn't rank the stances just because of how... I mean, what am I supposed to give this? Either it's an S tier because it allows you to, you know, charge and whatever, or it's like a D tier because you never actively want to, like, yes, finally I get Battle Stance. You start with this ability. There's nothing, I mean, yeah, let's just not rank Battle Stance. Bear form. Very, very strong. Obviously you have to consider this also as the dire bear form, or maybe we could rank them separately. Okay, let's rank them separately. Bear form has a significantly lower armor multiplier than dire bear form. Still obviously useful. Leveling a druid, you usually run around as a cat. Tanking as a druid, obviously you do it in a bear form. So this gives druids the ability to tank, so we kind of have to give this an A tier. Beast lore. With the modern, you know, WoW hat at hand, this is unfortunately a D tier ability. Basically useless. Just go to Petopia if you have questions about pets. Berserker Rage, very useful ability. Makes you immune to fear, even used in tanking. Beautiful spell. Yeah, A tier ability. Berserker Stance, similar to Battle Stance, I'm not sure. Why do I say stance? Battle Stance, Berserker Stance. I mean, obviously you use this to Whirlwind and whatnot, but again, it's really hard to rank this as an ability, because it's rather a combat form in which you then use abilities. But I guess that's the same for Druid forms. I should have thought about this before. Berserker Stance is... I mean, let's just give them all an A tier. Berserker Stance is A tier, Battle Stance is A tier. Fine. Blessing of Freedom. Incredibly strong ability. One of the strongest blessings in PvP. I kind of want to give Blessing of Freedom an S tier, just because of how incredibly strong it is. Especially talented, it becomes even stronger. So yeah, S tier. Blessing of Light, A tier ability, helps a lot with healing. One of the central blessings to heal Paladin. Yeah, A-tier ability. Blessing of Might. This is like a battle shout. Useful, obviously. Attack power is great to have. It's like a B-tier ability. Blessing of Protection, also very powerful. All the blessings of the Paladin, well, not all of them. Most of the blessings are very strong, so Blessing of Protection, also A-tier ability. Blessing of Sacrifice, yeah, this is perhaps the worst of the blessings. Very rarely used. It's like a C-tier ability. Blessing of Salvation, very powerful for endgame raiding. Giving this to warriors and rogues and warlocks, mages. Yeah, very useful ability. I would give Blessing of Salvation an A-tier. And Blessing of Wisdom, same thing. Beautiful ability. As I said, the blessings are all very strong. Blessing of Wisdom also A-tier ability. Blind. One of the central CC abilities for rogue and PvP. Yeah, I mean, there's hardly much to say about this. This is an A-tier ability. Create Blinding Powder. We don't have to rank this. Blink, I mean, this is an S-tier ability. Incredibly powerful. You get out of roots and stuns. One of the few movement abilities that cannot fail you because they are your character moving. So they cannot be resisted. Nothing can happen here unless you clip into the terrain, but that's your own misplay, I suppose. S-tier ability. And then we have perhaps what I would consider the only S+ tier ability in the game. Blizzard Talented is an ability that defines how the economy in World of Warcraft Classic works. This ability with the slowing talent is game defining. This is how mages farm insane amounts of golds within instances. Yeah, Blizzard S+. Blood Rage, useful mostly while tanking. It has its uses. It's not useless. I mean, I guess one of the beautiful things about this is that you can actively put yourself into combat, so you can make yourself immune to sap against rogues in PvP. Yeah, it's a useful ability, but I mean, it's like a C-tier ability. Called Pet. What would a hunter be without his pet? I mean, we don't have to rank this. Cat Form. This is unfortunately not as strong as it becomes in TBC, but it is the defining form for Feral Druid if you want to DPS, so A-tier ability. Chain Heal. I have to say I haven't played Horde enough to really judge how useful this is in grouping and raiding. Chain Heal spam is kind of a meme, I suppose, but I mean, it's a beautiful heal. One of the few actually useful AoE heals in the game, so I would give Chain Heal like a B tier. Chain Lightning. Similar to Chain Heal, I'm not exactly sure how useful this is for raid content or dungeon content. I don't like that it has a 6-second cooldown. Outside of that, it's a beautiful ability, of course. It's like, I mean, it's iconic because it's one of the Farseer abilities in Warcraft 3, so maybe we should give this an A tier. Nah, let's say B tier. Chain Lightning is B tier. Challenging Roar. It's like Challenging Shout for Warrior. Useful, of course. 10-minute cooldown is quite on the long end. I mean, it's like a C tier ability, and the same goes for Challenging Shout. Obviously very useful in group content, but the 10-minute cooldown makes it more of an oh shit I fucked up before button, so yeah, C tier. Charge. Charge and Intercept, one of the defining, in my opinion, abilities for Warrior. Charging into combat is just, it's kind of iconic. Unfortunately, you can't use this in combat in Classic, so kind of limited in its applications. You will usually be outranged by a range caster or a hunter before you can use this. It's like a C tier ability. Cheap Shot. This is the S tier rogue opener, useful against every class, 4-second stun. I mean, who doesn't like Sheep Shot? The sound of Sheep Shot is almost legendary. It's kind of the oh shit sound in PvP. Beautiful ability, very strong against every class, S tier. Claw, one of the spammable feral druid abilities. Not really anything too exciting about it. It's like Sinister Strike, but worse. It's like a, I don't know, it's like a C tier ability. Cleanse, incredibly powerful. The best dispel in the game. Dispels anything outside of curses. Beautiful ability. I will have to give Cleanse an A tier. Cleave, unfortunately very expensive. Uses your next melee swing, so you lose the rage gain and it costs 20 rage. If you want to attack 2 targets at once, use Sweeping Strikes. Cleave is like a C tier ability. Concentration Aura has its uses. Unfortunately, the Paladin already gets to 100% spell pushback reduction himself, so if you are the Pally healer, you don't need this yourself, and then having 35% on the other targets is like, okay, I mean, maybe in raiding when you have a healing group to get them to 100% pushback. Outside of that, I don't know, it's like a C tier ability. I know very few people who are excited about Concentration Aura. Concussive Shot, central ability to the hunter. It's like a far distance, long distance, daze. Yeah, it's a nice snare ability. It's like a B tier. Cone of Cold, very powerful AoE ability. Very strong, slow. I like that it has the actual cone-shaped AoE effect. I would give Cone of Cold a A tier. Conjure Food. No one is excited by Conjure Food. I mean, it's like a D tier ability. Conjure Mana Agate and Citrine and Jade and Ruby. All of these are basically the same ability, just different ranks of them. It's the mana gem for Mage, obviously very powerful. It's basically a mana potion that you get for free, central to mana management and raiding, A tier ability. Conjure Water. I know that I gave Conjure Food a D tier. The thing with Conjure Water is, if you would ask most mana classes, would you give up an ability to gain Conjure Water? They would probably say, yeah, I would give up, you know, whatever, water walking as a shaman or whatever it is, to have the ability to conjure up mana drinks on the spot. Kind of iconic to Mage Identity 2, the water dispenser. I would give this a B tier. Corruption. One of the damage over time effects for a Warlock. Unfortunately, you have to talent it to become instant, but it can become instant, so A tier ability. Counterspell. Also an A tier ability, obviously central to Mage PvP. Very strong. Also used just to keep targets in combat. Yeah, who doesn't like Counterspell? A tier ability. Cower. If you pull aggro as a cat druid, then something else must have gone wrong. D tier ability. Create Firestones. Again, all of these are the same ability, just different ranks. Borderline useless, D tier ability. Create Health Stones. Useful in all situations of the game. It's basically a health pot. Similar to the mana gems for Mage, just that you can even trade these away to party members. A tier ability. Create Soulstone, one of the 2 battle races. Well, actually, you could argue Ankh is a battle res for Shaman too. One of the 3 battle races in World of Warcraft Classic. Very, very strong ability. One of the main raid utilities that a Warlock brings. Powerful, iconic, A-tier ability. Create Spellstone. It's a bit like Create Firestone, just that this at least gives you, it gives you a spell damage absorb, which is useful in certain situations. So we have to give this a C tier. Crippling Poison, very powerful. Snare effect for rogues. I mean, everyone uses this in PvP. A tier ability. Cure diseases and cure poisons. We talked about this before, similar to Abolish, the second tier versions of that. Cure disease is like a C tier and cure poisons like a B tier ability. Even though you can downgrade these, because one of the reasons why Abolish poison is so strong is that you can give it to yourself before a rogue blinds you, and then it dispels the blind. You can't dispel yourself while you are blinded. So cure poison, weaker, significantly weaker than Abolish poison. So arguably you could give cure disease a C and cure poison also a C. Curse of Agony, one of the damage over time curses for actually the damage over time curse. No, actually Curse of Doom does also. No, actually, yeah, it is the damage over time curse for Warlock. Obviously very useful. One of the most used curses, unless you are the person to give Curse of the Elements to your raid boss or whatever. Yeah, it's an A tier ability. Curse of Doom, somewhat useless, deals a truck ton of shadow damage after 1 minute, and then you can summon the Doom Guard. Kind of a gimmicky ability. Not completely useless, but also, I mean, none of the abilities in the game are actually completely useless. So Curse of Doom, I'm sorry, D tier ability. Curse of Recklessness, quite useful in dungeon content to stop humanoids from fleeing. Yeah, has its applications, C tier ability. Curse of Shadow, unfortunately, it depends on the debuff slots available. In WoW Classic, you can kind of use this if the debuffs on your raid targets are managed already, depending on your raid composition. Outside of that, not really that useful. C tier ability. Curse of Elements, of course, is one of the central abilities, the central debuff slots that will be taken up. A tier ability, very, very strong. Curse of Tongues, useful for PvP. It's like a mind-numbing poison that you can apply to your target when you want to. It's like a B tier ability. And Curse of Weakness is a C tier curse. Nothing exciting about this. Reducing flat physical damage. It's like a stone skin totem. Not that interesting. C tier. Dampen Magic. It's a bit like Amplify Magic, maybe a bit underused. However, in PvP, this is very strong. If you are fighting any kind of caster that can't dispel magic effects, and even when you fight a caster that can dispel magic effects, you want to use this just to put yourself, give yourself another magic effect that has to be dispelled before the previous one. Very powerful ability, A tier ability. Dash, this is the cat form's sprint, obviously very useful. However, less useful than the rogue sprint because you do have travel form anyway. So we have to downrank this to like a B tier when we are going to give sprint an A tier. I'm now foreshadowing, but yes. Deadly Poison, one of the worst poisons in the game. Very rarely this is useful. It breaks your own CCs like a Gouge and blinds as a rogue. D tier ability. Death Coil, incredibly powerful spell. Perhaps S tier ability, just because it's not even a fear effect, it's a horror effect. So, you know, Berserker Rage and things like that won't protect your target. Incredibly strong. S tier ability. And Defensive Stance, we set it to all the stances. We're just going to give all of the stances A tier ability. Okay, next page. Let me drink some water. This video is already longer than I anticipated. Not really. I'm expecting this to be like 2 hours. Demon armor. It's the Warlock self buff. Nothing too exciting about it. The health regeneration is quite strong, but I mean, it's really not that useful. It's like a C tier ability. And Demon Skin is obviously the previous rank to Demon Armor, so also C tier ability. Demoralizing Roar. I'm not really a fan of Demoralizing Shout and Roar. Again, it just reduces flat melee damage taken. I mean, obviously it has its uses. It's like both of those are B tier abilities. Demoralizing Roar and Demoralizing Shout, B tier. Desperate Prayer. This is the Dwarven Human Priest racial. Does not cost mana. Instantly heals yourself. Kind of a situationally useful self-heal if you're out of mana, for example. So yeah, it has its uses, but I mean, it's a C tier ability. Detect greater invisibility, invisibility, and lesser invisibility. All of these are very rarely used. Very few mobs in the game that are invisible. D tier ability. Detect magic. Also kind of a D tier ability. Knowing what kind of buffs your targets have as a mage does not really help you much. Yeah, you don't want to use a global cooldown for this. This is a D tier ability. Detect traps. Also, I mean, sure, it's nice to be able to see traps, but there's very rarely any use for this. It's like a D tier ability. Devotion Aura. One of the lamest abilities in the game. It just gives armor. Great to your party. I mean, obviously armor is useful, but this is really as boring as it gets. C tier ability. Devouring Plague. Very powerful, very expensive, and has a long cooldown, but very, very powerful. This is the Undead level 20 Priest racial. Yeah, it's a strong ability. It's like an A tier. Dire Bear Form. Similar to Bear Form, just that this is now the upgraded version. You now have a 360% armor multiplier. Same thing, A tier ability. Disarm. Very strong ability for the warrior here in PvP. In PvE, not really that useful, because most of the damage that NPCs do is just their flat physical damage values. It's not really their weapons. Against players in PvP, very powerful, obviously. A rogue can't, you know, gouge or sinister strike when they're disarmed. So yeah, very strong. It's an A tier ability. Disarm Trap. It's like detect traps. Obviously it has its uses, but I mean, very, very rarely you will need this D tier ability. Disease Cleansing Totem. It's a bit like Abolish Disease, but worse, because you have to stay within the totem range. Really not that useful. D tier ability. Disengage. Why does your hunter pull aggro? I don't know. Useful for leveling, I suppose, but outside of that, all these threat drop mechanics, I kind of want to give all of them a C tier. Dismiss Pet, we don't have to rank this. Please use this ability if you're in dungeons and you're about to jump down a ledge or something. This can save groups' lives, but I'm not gonna rank this. I mean, it sends your pet away, of course. Dispel Magic, powerful ability, very useful in PvP. A tier ability. Distract, also very powerful ability actually. If you have someone who controls their character with just pressing W on their keyboard, you can actually send them off ledges and stuff, so it's actually kind of a good one. Obviously very powerful in PvE as well. Repositioning mobs so they don't see you in stealth. It's like an A tier ability. Distracting Shot. Even worse than Disengage. Why does your hunter want to pull aggro? D tier ability. Divine Intervention. Has its uses. It's mostly just paladins who don't want to take durability loss when the raid is wiping. I mean, it has its uses, but okay, D tier ability. Divine Protection. This is the first version of the Divine Shield, you could say. Becomes basically obsolete after you have Divine Shield. I mean, it's a paladin bubble, it's strong. All immunities in the game are obviously strong. I would give Divine Protection a B tier. And then Divine Shield obviously is an A tier ability, kind of iconic and central to the paladin identity. Very strong, gets rid of all your debuffs. Yeah, it's a strong ability, A tier. Drain Life. I'm not a fan of Drain Life. The fact that you have to channel it makes it really... I mean, your Warlock does not want to stand around in the same place for 5 seconds channeling a spell. Obviously when your target is feared, maybe. I'm not really a fan of either Drain Life nor Drain Mana. I will give this a B tier, and the Drain Mana also a B tier. And then Drain Soul obviously is a C tier ability. You use it for soul shards, that's about it. If you have a talented, you can get mana regeneration for it too. So that's nice, I guess. Eagle Eye. I mean, D tier ability. Earth Shock. Incredibly powerful spell. Deals a truckload of nature damage. Interrupts the target. Short cooldown. Incredibly powerful. I think the first spell interrupt that any class gets. Just beautiful ability. A tier ability. Earthbind Totem. One of the weakest roots in the game. Unfortunately, the spell batching in Classic didn't help this one. People are usually outside of the totem range before they even get affected. It's like a D tier totem. Elun's Graze, also a D tier self buff. If this would not cost mana, it would be maybe a bit useful, but the fact that it costs mana and has a 5-minute cooldown, nah, D tier. Enrage, it's a bit like Blood Rage for Druid, just that you actually lose armor for this one. I mean, it has its uses, but overall it's a C tier ability. Enslave Demon, very few uses for this one, kind of gimmicky. Obviously it's cool as a Warlock to be able to enslave demons, but you won't really use this. It's like a C tier ability, or I mean D tier actually. It's a D tier ability. Entangling Roots, incredibly strong spell for PvP. Outdoors, obviously one of the strongest CC spells in the game. Yeah, very powerful. Unfortunately, most instanced content is indoors, so that's a big bummer. B tier ability. Evasion, obviously one of the strongest cooldowns on a rogue, 50% dodge chance for 15 seconds, incredibly strong. Talented, it's a 3-minute cooldown. Yeah, beautiful ability. It's like a B tier. Eviscerate. Before gear was a thing, this would have been an S tier finisher, because the flat physical damage was actually insane early on in World of Warcraft. Now in the classic state of the game with classic items, let alone, you know, phase 6 items, kind of falling behind, because this increase by attack power is really weak. It's like an A tier ability still. Evocation, also an A tier ability, obviously very strong, being able to gain back to full mana every 8 minutes. Beautiful, very strong for mana management in raids. Yeah, A tier ability. Execute, also an A tier ability, kind of iconic warrior, finishing move, powerful, very useful, both in PvE and PvP, A tier ability. Exorcism, very rarely used. Paladins can use this to tank Strattlements, Skolements, I suppose. Maybe when you have a Retribution Paladin in your Naxxramas raid, they can do a bit more damage that way. Not really that useful. I'm sorry, D tier ability. Explosive Trap. I am not a fan of Explosive Trap, nor am I a fan of the Shaman AoE totems. It just seems a bit gimmicky to do this like AoE once as a class that can't otherwise really do reliable AoE damage. Not really a big fan of Explosive Trap. I will give Explosive Trap a C tier. Expose Armor. I'm not really sure why this is supposed to be a finishing move. You don't finish your target by exposing its armor to then start dealing damage. I don't like the idea behind this ability. I don't like the strength of the ability. It's like a C tier ability. Eye of Kilrock. Again, kind of a gimmicky Warlock ability. Similar to Eyes of the Beast, actually. I will give both of these like a C tier. I know that some people would say, what? Eyes of the Beast is a D tier ability as they come. Actually, when you think about the applications of Eye of the Beast, there are actually quite a few situations in which this spell is quite useful, especially during like playing leveling. So you have to keep these things in mind. They're not borderline useless, so yeah, I will give both of these a C tier. Fade. This is an ability that is quite strong for the duration of the Fade. Unfortunately, it does not actually drop your threat. As far as I can tell from having duo leveled with a priest, this really is just 10 seconds of your threat level gets reduced, but after the duration you actually get pumped back up, which is kind of a bummer. I will give Fade a C tier ability. Fairy Fire, incredibly strong ability, A tier ability. See, this is what Expose Armor should be like. When at the beginning of the fight you get to expose your target's armor so you then do more damage, not as a finishing move. So Fairy Fire, A tier ability. Farsight, similar to Eagle Eye, it's like a C tier, D tier ability. Fear, obviously one of the strongest Warlock spells in the game, incredibly powerful for PvP. One of the reasons why leveling a Warlock is such a joke. It's like an A tier ability. Fear Ward. Going into TPC, obviously every priest gets this. This is the reason why you see so many dwarf priests. Incredibly powerful, but I'm not going to give this an S tier, but it's an A tier ability. Feed Pet, we don't have to rank this. Feedback. It's kind of funny that this is the equivalent to Fear Ward. Very weak C tier ability. Feign Death, iconic for Hunter. Everyone knows that story of that Norwegian kid who saved his sister by knowing how to feign death because of World of Warcraft. There's this urban myth. Iconic ability, very strong. Allows you to trap during combat if you macro it. Yeah, it's an A tier ability. Feint. This is what I was talking about with the Fate. Fate does not actually reduce your threat level, it just lowers your threat level artificially for 10 seconds. Feint actually removes some of your threat. So Feint, quite useful in raiding. Then again, your rogues probably aren't on top of the threat meter. It will probably be the warriors and the warlocks. So C tier ability. Feline Grace reduces the fall damage as a feral druid. I mean, sure, it's like safe falling for a rogue. I mean, D tier ability. Ferocious Bite. You are very happy when you play a feral druid and you finally get this because it's level 32 and this is the first time you get a finishing move that actually just does damage to finish the target. On that level, it's basically like Eviscerate, so we also have to give it an A tier. Fire Blast, one of the instant Fire spells for Mage, obviously very strong. A tier ability. Fire Nova Totem. This is one of these spells where I'm like, Explosive Trap, right? It's very gimmicky because you're not gonna AoE as a Shaman. So, C tier ability. We don't have to rank this. Fire Resistance Aura. All the resistance auras for the Paladin get a C tier because, I mean, they're useful, but also very not exciting. So yes, C tier. Same for Fire Resistance Totem, also a C tier. Fire Ward, very useful mage spell, protects you from pushback as well against, you know, imps from Warlocks, Warlock fire damage, obviously, other mages. Shamans, should they use fire spells. So yeah, a very useful ability. B tier. Fireball, I mean, it's the first mage ability, mage damage ability. Kind of iconic, very strong. Deals a truckload of damage. Everyone loves Fireball. A tier ability. Flame Shock, arguably the weakest of the shock abilities. Yeah, there's not really that much to say to that. Frost Shock is way better, Earth Shock is way better. So this is... It's still a shock ability, so it's strong on that level. It's like a B tier ability. Flame Strike, in my opinion, the weakest of the mage AoE abilities. I think Blizzard and Arcane Explosion, even Blast Wave or Cone of Cold are just better than Flame Strike. Very clunky. If the damage over time would be applied to your targets, it would be nice. The fact that it is localized to where you cast the spell, C tier ability. Flame Tongue Totem, never use this. Useless, bad, don't use it, bad, 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 D tier ability. Flame Tongue Weapon, I think endgame, this is the strongest enhancement for elemental shamans. Then again, when do you auto attack, like melee attack with an elemental shaman? C tier ability. Flare, strong hunter ability for PvP, kind of being able to take mobs out of invisibility or stealth from range and actually making that spot just no longer stealthable. It's quite useful. B tier ability. Flash Heal, not really that special, too expensive mana wise. As a priest you usually just spam heal. Yeah, it's like a C tier heal. Flash of Light, on the other hand, I would give this... I'm hesitant to give it an S tier just because it's a heal ability. And heal abilities need to be very special to be S tier. But Flash of Light, the mana efficiency of that spell is just incredible. Somewhere between A tier and S tier. This is the defining Paladin heal ability. And I think it is also way more in line with the vibe of a Paladin. You know, these fast heals that don't heal a lot, but are cheap to cast and fast to cast. And then you go back to battle with your, you know, two-handed mace or whatever. So, yeah, A tier, somewhere between A tier and S tier. Freezing Trap, of course the strongest trap in PvP. Very powerful CC ability, A tier ability. Frenzied Regeneration. It has its uses. It's not useless, but giving up your rage, which is your resource to actually do stuff with, generally speaking, kind of a bad idea. C tier ability. Frost Armor and Ice Armor, arguably one of the strongest buffs in the game. The fact that it snares and reduces the attack timer, like swing timer of your target, and it gives you armor, and then later on gives you frost resistance, just incredibly powerful. I think it's the lowest level snare in the game too. There's no spell for any other class that you learn so early that, you know, allows you to snare targets. A tier buff. Frost Nova, of course, also A tier ability, iconic to mage playstyle. Roots in AoE, Very powerful A tier ability. This is one of the Hunter abilities that we don't need to rank. Frost Resistance Aura and Frost Resistance Totem, I said that before, all of these will get C tier. They have their uses, nothing special, C tier. Frost Shock, also an A tier shock, very, very strong, incredibly strong CC for PvP especially. Also deals a truck ton of damage, A tier ability. Frost Trap, not really that useful. It is of course nice for PvP, so it's like a B tier trap, B tier ability. Frost Ward, similar to Fire Ward. Yeah, it's like a B tier buff. Frost Bolt, S tier. This is alongside with Blizzard, of course, your Frost Mage ability. This is kind of the defining ability for PvE mages. It's the defining ability for PvP mages. Just, I mean, incredibly strong spell. S tier ability. Frostbrand Weapon. I really don't like this one. The fact that it snares your target on a random proc is just really bad. If you need to snare your target, you need to snare it when you want to snare it, not when your weapon decides to randomly proc. C tier ability. Garrote. I wish this would already have a silence effect in World of Warcraft Classic. I think they added in TBC that your target gets silenced. It would have just been perfect for this. Unfortunately, it does not have that. Dots, of course, have their applications even as a rogue, but generally speaking, very weak. C tier ability. Ghost Wolf. It's like the worst travel form, significantly worse travel form. The fact that even talented, you still have a second of a cast time. Not that useful. It's like, I mean, it's still a movement speed ability, so that is a huge boon, but it's like a B tier ability. Gift of the Wild. I'm hesitant ranking this alongside with Arcane Intellect or something like Fortitude, just because Gift of the Wild or like Mark of the Wild is just among the strongest of the attribute buffs. It gives attributes, armor, and resistances. Yeah, Gift of the Wild, Mark of the Wild, maybe a B tier ability. Gouge, incredibly strong. One of the central PvP abilities for a rogue. Even in PvE, while questing and things like that, when you talent this, the duration is 5.5 seconds, which is enough for you to pick up quest items. Incredibly strong. A tier ability. Grace of Air Totem. I don't like these. It's like a totem attribute buffs. Not a fan. C tier ability. Blessing of... well, all these greater blessings are just the group versions of their individual versions, so they're the same thing, pretty much. All of them are ranked whatever the other one was ranked. We didn't talk about Blessing of Sanctuary early because it's a talent, so it's on a different browser tab here, but yeah, we can go back to this later when we talk about Blessing of Sanctuary. Greater Heal, in my opinion, a very rarely useful spell. Just the cast duration and the mana cost are just not... I mean, it's just too long of a cast. And it's gonna overheal your target in 90% of the cases. Unless you spam this on like a raid main tank, it's really not that useful. Of course, when we talk about raiding, it is probably one of the centrally used healing abilities. But yeah, it's like a B tier heal. Grounding Totem, incredibly strong spell. Very, very useful for PvP. A tier ability. As far as totems go, Grounding Totem is one of the best. Growl. I mean, this is like taunt for Druid. I mean, taunt is nice, right? So if you're a protection paladin, you might give this an S tier because you're envious. I mean, taunt is like an A tier. All of the taunts in the game, I suppose, are A tier abilities. Even though I gave the AoE taunts like a C or B tier, but that's because they have a 10-minute cooldown, right? So Growl, I mean, let's just say B tier perhaps. Hammer of Justice, like the Druid Stun, just a bit better because it has a longer duration. Iconic Paladin ability, B tier. Hammer of Wrath, I really don't like this ability because it has a cast time, meaning that if your target doesn't die after using this, you actually get a swing timer. So you cast this on your target, the target doesn't die because it doesn't really do that much damage, and then you stand there waiting for your swing, unless you can judge, obviously. But yeah, not a fan of this one. C tier ability. Although in PvP it is obviously used, so maybe C or B tier, somewhere in between. Hamstring, you use this all the time in PvP as a warrior. You use it in PvP all the time too. A tier ability. Heal, this is also an A tier heal because I think this is probably the most used heal for a priest, generally speaking. Yeah, I would give heal A or B tier. Healing Stream Totem, very weak. Not a fan of this at all. C tier ability. Okay, that's halfway through. Less than halfway through, actually. Healing Touch, beautiful heal ability, spammable from level 1 to level 60. Depending on the ranking, obviously, you can use, you know, Healing Touch rank 4 for that mana efficiency, rank 7 if you really want to dish out bigger heals. Beautiful heal. I mean, same with Healing Wave actually. Both of these, this is the Shaman version, this is the Druid version. A beautiful heal ability, spammable at every level. Both of these are rank tier A heals. Health Funnel. I mean, it has its uses, obviously. Very rarely you need to heal your demon. It's like a C tier ability. Hellfire, arguably the strongest of the Warlock AoEs. A tier ability, iconic, setting himself on fire, herself on fire. It's just, I love Hellfire. Beautiful, beautiful ability. A tier. Heroic Strike, one of the few abilities you use as a warrior while leveling. Unfortunately, very expensive, rage expensive, because you lose the rage on your next auto attack, obviously, the rage generation. So all things considered, this is like a rage dump. Outside of that, not really that useful. C tier ability. Hex of Weakness has its uses. I like the healing reduction. Compared to the other priest racials, this is stronger. So it's like a B tier ability. Hibernate, very rarely useful. When do you encounter beast or dragonkin that you need to sleep? I mean, it's like a C tier ability. Holy Fire, way too expensive. And way too long of a cast. Why do you try to DPS as a priest? Unfortunately, it's just not really going to happen. Smite priests, Holy Fire priests, that's not really a thing. I mean, you use this while leveling, I suppose, for mana efficiency, but outside of that, C tier ability. Holy Light. I said earlier that Flash of Light, in my opinion, is the defining healing ability. Holy Light, I think, it just is too expensive mana-wise to spam it. Unless, obviously, we talk about a high-geared Paladin that has so much crit that they can maintain spamming Holy Light. Then, obviously, your healing per second will be significantly higher using Holy Light than Flash of Light. It's like a B-tier heal. Holy Wrath, similar to Exorcism. Very few applications of this C-tier ability. Howl of Terror. I find it funny that the Warlock, who is the fear class, has a worse AoE fear than Priest. I just find that interesting. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of Howl of Terror. I think the cast time is just over-exaggerated. Should be maybe a second. C tier ability. Hunter's Mark has some use in PvP, obviously. In PvE, I really don't like that you have to give your target a debuff that then gives you a buff equivalent to what other classes have to just give themselves for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it is. It's like a C tier ability. Hurricane. Unfortunately, Balanced Druid is just not really a thing in classic World of Warcraft, so Hurricane alongside with all other Balanced Druid spells, C tier. Ice Armor, I said this earlier, it's the second rank of Frost Armor, A tier ability. Immolate, iconic Warlock ability, central to the Warlock playstyle, A tier ability. Immolation Trap, it's similar to Explosive Trap, useful, of course, has its applications. It doesn't really scale at level 60 going forward with gear, so C tier ability. I don't know why this is listed here, this is not an ability. Inferno, very gimmicky, almost no uses for this, C tier ability. Inner Fire, very strong buff, truck ton of armor. I like the interaction with the charges, and you know, you give yourself powered shields so you don't lose the charges when hit. Really cool interaction. Strong buff, B tier ability. Innovate, one of the central raid utilities brought by a druid, A tier ability, very strong. Yeah, everyone loves Innovate, A tier. Instant Poison, one of the strongest poisons for Rogue. Probably the most used poison for Rogue, so A tier ability. Intercept is a bit like Charge, just that you can actually use this in combat and it stuns the target for a significantly longer duration, so actually very useful in PvP. Central to PvP, A tier ability. Intimidating Shout, similar to Intercept, very central to Warrior PvP, incredibly strong. Allows you to bandage, allows you to, you know, sit out a Frost Nova or whatever. It's an A tier ability. Judgment. This is a hard one to rank because it depends on what you are judging. So it's almost like this can't even be really ranked because it's really the seals that we are talking about that would be judged. So I have to defer judging. Ranking this one. Judgment. Kick. Central to the Rogue PvP toolkit. Obviously it's a spell interrupt, very useful. This is iconic because Kick has become the name for any kind of spell interrupt, right? So yeah, iconic ability, A tier ability. Kidney Shot, one of the strongest finishing moves for PvP. Stuns are just so strong in this game, taking away player control of your opponent, just so strong, A tier ability. Lay on Hands, I don't like the hour-long cooldown. I'm a hoarder, I don't like 1 hour cooldown spells, they make me not want to ever use them. I mean, C tier ability. Lesser Heal, this is kind of the same as Heal, I mean this becomes Heal. So this is like a B tier ability. Lesser Healing Wave, a bit too expensive. This is like Flesh Heal. Is it Flesh Heal? I think it's Flesh Heal, yeah. The Priest Quick Heal. Obviously it has its uses, but Healing Wave is just superior in most situations, unless you really have to pump out those heals in PvP or whatever. It's like a C or B tier heal. Levitate, very few uses for this. It's like Slow Fall, allows you to walk over water, has its applications. Outside of that, it's like a C tier ability. Life Tap, A tier ability, wonderful spell, allows you to convert health into mana, and you can convert mana into health as a Warlock. Central to the kind of complexity of the Warlock class as a caster, A tier ability. Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt. I mean, if Elemental Shamans were more of an actual raid DPS, then Lightning Bolt would be next to, I guess, Frostbolt. It's really not though, so I don't know. B tier, C tier ability. Lightning Shield, I like Lightning Shield. Lightning Shield allows you to front load your mana expenditure for DPS. Very nice in PvP and in leveling. I will give Lightning Shield a B tier. Mage Armor, very weak. Given how strong Ice Armor is and the fact that you have to take Mage Armor or Ice Armor, I would in most situations take the Ice Armor. Mage Armor is like a C tier ability. Magma Totem, again one of these AoE totems that won't really be enough to AoE anything down. It's like a C tier ability. Mana Burn has, especially when talented, really quite its uses. It's like up there with Wyvern Sting. I think Mana Burn is like a B tier ability. Mana Shield is incredibly strong. Beautiful ability. A tier ability. If you run out of health before you run out of mana as a mage in PvP, usually you've done something wrong, unless your opponent was a mage too and did not do any physical damage, who knows. But Mana Shield, incredibly strong. Protects you from spell pushback, protects you from daze, protects you from dismounting. Just a beautiful ability. A tier. Mana Spring Totem, more useful than Healing Stream. It's like a B tier ability. Mark of the Wild, same as Gift of the Wild, B tier ability, one of the strongest buffs in the game. Maul, this is like Heroic Strike for Bear Druid. Similar to Heroic Strike, one of the few abilities you actually get to use. Outside of Swipe, I suppose. Swipe is actually quite strong. Yeah, it's like a Rage Dump. It's like a B or C tier ability. Ment Pet, unfortunately channeled in Classic World of Warcraft, it becomes instant in, it becomes like a dot or a buff in TBC. The channeling is really annoying for a hunter. It's like a C tier ability. Mind Blast, very strong, obviously. You usually use this on cooldown when you level a priest. In PvP it's also very strong. Deals a truck ton of threat though, not really useful for group content because you're very likely to pull aggro. But obviously Shadow Priest needs to use this on cooldown as well. It's like an A tier ability. Mind Control, beautiful ability for PvP. Outside of that, very few uses outside of like, I mean, you use it in like Blackwing Lair to control the goblins or whatever. It's like, B tier ability. Mind Soothe, very few uses for this one. It's nice while questing, but outside of that, I mean, it's like a D tier ability. And Mind Vision, the same thing. D tier ability. Mind Soothe, certainly more useful than Mind Vision, but yeah, D tier ability. You can't really put this on the same rank as Eye of the Beast or Eye of Kilrock, because you don't get to control the target, right? So yeah, D tier ability. Mind Numbing Poison, useful against casters, as like a B tier poison. Mocking Blow, it's like a taunt on a 2-minute cooldown, so same as taunt, it's like a B tier ability. B or A tier, depending on how you want to rank taunts. Mongoose Bite, D tier ability, horrible ability. Just deals a minuscule amount of flat damage. Your weapon doesn't matter, your attack power doesn't matter, it's just a bad ability. And it's melee for a hunter, just terrible. D tier. Moonfire. I know that I said that all the balance spells for Druid are kind of but Moonfire is iconic and has its uses, keeping targets in combat, disallowing rogues from stealthing. It's like a B tier ability. Multi-shot, S tier ability, arguably the strongest hunter ability in the game. Yeah, I mean, you get it's basically getting another auto shot, just that this time you even hit more targets. Incredibly strong S tier ability. These two we don't have to talk about. Nature Resistance Totem, again, C tier. Overpower, I mean, iconic warrior ability. It has 50% crit, base crit if you talent it. In PvP, this is one of the things you are afraid of when you fight a warrior. A tier ability. Pick Lock. I mean, it's a utility spell by rogues. Has its uses, C tier ability. Pickpocket, same thing, it's nice for rogues to farm some cash, I suppose, C tier ability. Poison Cleansing Totem, it's a bit like all the other dispelling totems. It's useful, but the fact that you have to stay within the totem range, I mean, I have to rank it a bit below Abolish Poison, so we have to do this. We have to give this a C tier. Poisons, of course, central. I mean, we rank the poisons individually. We don't have to rank poisons as a profession for rogues. Polymorph. I mean, Polymorph. I'm hesitant to give this another S tier, given how many S tiers I've already given to Mage, but keep in mind, Mage is by far the most busted class in World of Warcraft Classic, so all things considered, it's fair to give Mage another S tier, which is Polymorph, one of the strongest CC abilities in the game. And obviously, Polymorph, Pick and Turtle and Cow? I don't think that's in the game. Same thing. Portals to Darnassus, Ironforge, Orgrimmar, Stormwind, and Thunderbluff in Undercity. I mean, everyone loves portals. Nothing exciting about them, though. It's like a C tier ability. Pounce. This is like the cheap shot for druids, just significantly weaker because it actually gives your target a dot, which then breaks CCs and whatnot. And the stun lasts for a shorter duration. Pounce is like a C tier ability. Powered Fortitude. I mentioned this before. All the flat attribute buffs are kind of lame. It's like a C tier ability. Powered Shield. Incredibly strong ability. A tier to S tier. Again, absorbs are very strong in World of Warcraft Classic because they prevent pushbacks and dazes and dismounts and all of that. So yeah, somewhere between A tier and S tier. Prayer of Fortitude, same as Powered Fortitude, just a group version. Prayer of Healing, not really that useful. When does your group take like equal spread out damage? Very few situations. Cast time is very long, very mana intensive. Prayer of Healing is like a C tier heal. Prayer of Shadow Protection. This is the AoE version of Shadow Protection for Priest. Has its uses, obviously, but it's like a resistance thing, so it's C tier as all the other resistances. Prayer of Spirit, same attribute buff, the group version, C tier. Prowl, it's like stealth for the druid, but weaker than rogue stealth. It has a weaker stealth level. It's like a B tier ability. I mean, it's still a stealth, so it's very strong in PvP, obviously. Psychic Scream. This is what I was talking about when I spoke about Howl of Terror. Just incredibly strong. Kind of insane to me that Priest has this crazy AoE fear. Yeah, beautiful ability. A tier ability. Pummel. Finally, the warrior gets a spell interrupt at level 38. Well, you get shield slam, shield bash or whatever, but you have to switch stances and no one fights in defensive stance, so, or like use a shield rather. That's the problem. I think you can use shield bash in combat battle stance, but you need to have a shield equipped, so there's that. Pummel is, I mean, it's a spell interrupt. It's like kick. It's like a A tier ability. Purge, a bit like this spell. Very useful in PvP. Yeah, I will give Purge in tier B. Purify. This becomes obsolete once you get Cleanse. So, I mean, you could give this a D tier ability because it becomes useless, but then you could give all the other abilities that become useless because of later abilities Ds, and that's not really fair. So, I mean, Purify is still useful. It's like a C tier ability that then becomes replaced by Cleanse, which is, you know, just incredibly strong. Rain of Fire, the worst Hellfire. I really don't like Rain of Fire. In most situations in which I can see a Warlock AoEing, they should just Hellfire. Yeah, Rain of Fire is like a C tier ability. Rake, also a C tier ability. I don't really like it. If it would stack up or something, there would be an interesting mechanic to it. The way that it is, it's just a very weak dot. Yeah, it's like a C tier ability. Rapid Fire, very strong. Cooldown for hunters, obviously, 40%. I need to put on my glasses. I just realized I spent an hour reading without having my glasses on. Smart. Yeah, very strong cooldown for hunters. Powerful. It's like a B tier ability. Raptor Strike, it's like Mongoose Strike. It's stronger than Mongoose Strike actually, but it's still a melee hunter ability. If you are in melee as a hunter, you are busy doing other things. You don't have to worry about doing DPS. So Raptor Strike, unfortunately, D tier ability. Ravage, this is like ambush for the Feral Druid. Useful, obviously. I think probably the most used opener for Feral Druid. So yeah, it's like an A tier ability. Rebirth, the actual one, like cast combat res in World of Warcraft Classic. Obviously, very powerful combat reses. Everyone loves them. A tier ability. Recklessness. Oh man, a warrior just becomes a killing machine when they pop this. Obviously, a long cooldown, but all your attacks are critical strikes. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. A tier ability. Redemption. It's a resurrection spell. As mentioned earlier, all the resurrection spells get a C tier. Regrowth. Very powerful healing spell for Druid. Yeah, it's like an A tier heal. I really like Regrowth. Regrowth and, I mean, Druid healers in general are very nice. So Regrowth is kind of a combination of a healing over time and a front-loaded heal. Very useful also in PvP. Yeah, I like Regrowth. I like the short cast time. Reincarnation. This is the Shaman ability to raise from the dead. Yeah, useful. It's like a B tier ability. Rejuvenation, also iconic Druid ability. Unfortunately, it takes up a buff slot, as does Regrowth, of course, so that's not really fair. But yeah, it's like a B tier, A tier ability. Remove Curse. I mean, it's a dispel, not really that interesting. Same with the mage version of it. It's like a C tier ability. Rend, horrible ability. You don't want to ever use this on a warrior. It's just, it doesn't scale with anything. It's just bad. D tier ability. Renew. I guess it's the priest version of rejuvenation. So, I mean, healing over times in general are also always nice, because they flatten out a bit of that overheal, but they take up buff slots. So yeah, it's like an A to B tier ability. Resurrection, same thing, C tier ability. Retaliation, not at all on the level of Recklessness. Obviously powerful, any 30-minute cooldown is usually powerful, but it's like a B tier, C tier ability. Very strong against rogues, obviously, in PvP, but so yeah, B tier ability. Retribution Aura. I wish there was more in the game that allowed you to build like a Thorns Paladin, like you used to play in Diablo 2, but unfortunately there's not really much of that. Retribution Aura is like a C tier ability. Revenge. Revenge is actually underrated, or at least new players to the game don't realize how much threat this actually generates. This is the highest amount of threat per rage you can do as a warrior. Very useful on that front. You can give it a stun effect too from the talents, which isn't that important, but the rage to threat efficiency of this spell is incredible. Unfortunately, it's really low damage, so if the damage would be a bit higher, it would be an A tier, but it's still, the threat is just so exceptional. It's a B tier ability. Revive Pet. I mean, all these pet abilities are kind of not rankable. I mean, yeah, you want to have your pet. Being able to revive it is kind of nice. I can't rank this. Righteous Fury. This is necessary if you want to tank as a Paladin, obviously. It's like the defensive stance version for tank Paladin. I mean, it's necessary, but it doesn't, like, there's no interesting interactions to it or whatever, so it's like a C tier ability. Rip. Again, one of these weird, why is a finishing move doing damage over time? That's not what finishing a target is. I don't like it. C tier ability. Ritual of Doom. Again, very gimmicky. Very, very gimmicky. C tier ability. Ritual of Summoning. Now this, on the other hand, is incredibly useful. This is an S tier ability. I mean, it's central to how groups and raids organize logistically. Yeah, incredibly powerful group utility for the Warlock. S tier ability. Rockbiter Weapon. While leveling, this is arguably the strongest weapon enhancement because the attack power it gives can of course crit from your melee crit rating. Also, it scales with your level, so the attack power increases with each level of your character after you train it. So beautiful ability for leveling. In raiding, I mean, there is no enhancement shaman in raiding, so it's like a B to C tier ability. Rupture. Same thing as Rip for the Druid. Why a finishing move that deals damage over time? I don't really understand the logic behind the spells. I don't think they're very strong. It's like a C tier ability. Safe Fall, same as Feline Grace, C tier. Seb, very strong ability. One of the strongest PvP abilities in the game. Very scary too. It's like between A tier and S tier. Unfortunately, in Classic, I leveled a rogue to 60 and I've had a lot of trouble with being put into combat despite not de-stealthing. So when you talent Seb, you have a 90% chance not to de-stealth, right? But even if I didn't de-stealth, after like 4 or 5 seconds, the mob that I sapped still got added to my threat table. I don't really understand how that works. It's a bit buggy, I think. But yeah, it's still A tier to S tier ability. Scare Beast, very strong in PvP against druids. Outside of that, very little use. C tier ability. Scourge, the fastest cast mage spell in the game. Very useful in PvP. Outside of that, not really that powerful. I suppose you can have one Scourge mage in like a raid group or something to stack up the Scourge debuff for fire damage. But yeah, it's like a B tier, C tier ability. Scorpion Sting, horrendous ability. You have one sting per target. It should not be Scorpion Sting, D tier. Seal of Justice, randomly stunning a target is just really, really bad. The thing is, the judgment of this one is actually quite useful because it prevents targets from fleeing, humanoids for example in dungeons. So it's a bit like Curse of Recklessness on that end. But the actual seal itself, the random stuns, horrendous. C tier ability. Seal of Light, very useful ability. The judgment for this is very strong if you have a melee group in a dungeon. Yeah, beautiful ability, B tier seal. Seal of Righteousness, it's a DPS seal. Paladins in general shouldn't really be DPS role. Kind of becomes obsolete. If you want a DPS, just get the Seal of Command. Seal of Righteousness is like a C tier seal. Seal of Crusader, horrendous ability. I don't know what was the thought behind this. D tier ability. Seal of Wisdom, similar to Seal of Light, very strong if you have a caster heavy class, caster heavy group. Very useful for restoring mana. So it's like a B tier ability. Searing Pain, it's a bit like Scourge but way worse. And it has a threat multiplier, so you can't really use it in PvE content anyway. It's like a C tier ability. C to D tier ability. Searing Totem. I don't like totems in Classic because you don't have control over them. So if you use totems, they should be like beneficiary totems to you rather than hostile totems that then randomly attack targets. So Searing Totem, very few situations in which this is actually useful. It's like a C tier ability. Sense Demons and Sense Undead. D tier abilities. Sentry Totem, D tier ability. Almost useless. I don't really understand. I just don't really see any use for this. Especially given that you can just Eagle Eye, right? Unless you're inside, obviously. But in what situations is that really useful? I don't understand. Yeah, it's a D tier ability. Serpent Sting. Perhaps one of the most useful stings for Hunter. That's not saying a lot. I guess Viper Sting is obviously very, very strong. But Serpent Sting is like a C tier ability. Shackle Undead, also not really that useful. Few applications in the game where you actually have to shackle an undead target. It's like a C tier ability. Shadow Bolt, very strong cast for the Warlock. Incredible spell power coefficient because the spell cast time goes up to 3.5 seconds, so it has the maximum spell power coefficient. Yeah, very powerful. You can get instant Shadow Balls with Nightfall, I think the proc is called. I'm not sure. Yeah, beautiful ability, A tier ability. Shadow Protection, we talked about all of these. All of these are C tier abilities. Yeah, they're not really that special. C tier, C tier, C tier. Shadow Resistance Aura. Shadow Ward, I like absorb abilities, you probably realized that by now. So Shadow Ward also gets a B tier, even though it is less useful than the Frost and Fire Ward, because there's just the chance of encountering a shadow damage caster is just lower than Frost or Fire, so it's like a B tier still. Shadow Word Pain, obviously an A tier ability, central to the Shadow Priest toolkit. Yeah, beautiful ability, can proc blackouts, obviously very strong. Shadow Guard, speaking about blackouts, arguably one of the strongest priest racial abilities. It works a bit like Lightning Shield for Shaman, but it deals shadow damage, so it can proc the stuns if you're a Shadow Priest. It's like an A to B tier ability. Shield Bash, talked about this before. It's a spell interrupt, but one that requires you to wear a shield. Kind of annoying on that front, so it's worse than Pummel just in every way. So it's like a C or, yeah, it's a C tier ability. Shield Block, obviously S tier ability. Shield Block is what makes warrior tanks the tank in raids. There's not really anything to discuss here. This is the warrior tanking ability that prevents you from getting ever crushing blows, so yeah, S tier ability. Shield Wall, obviously very strong, 30-minute cooldown. It's somewhere on the same level as Recklessness and Retaliation. So it's like a B or A tier ability. Shred, this is basically the Feral Druid equivalent to Backstep. It's a bit weaker because it doesn't scale with your weapon, obviously, but that's just Feral Druid. It's like a B or A tier ability. Sinister Strike, kind of iconic rogue ability. It's like the one thing you spam throughout the game. I mean, nothing special about it. It just does an extra weapon attack. It's like a B tier ability. Slam, unfortunately, has become a D tier ability. It used to be incredibly strong. When I first played the game during the American beta, this was not triggering weapon swing timers, but now that it does, it's just, I mean, it's a D tier ability. Very few uses for this. Slice and Dice, incredibly strong ability for rogues. Obviously want to have Slice and Dice up if you raid. Yeah, beautiful ability, B tier ability. Slow Fall, useful, but I mean, you're not gonna kill anyone by falling a bit slower, so C tier ability. Smite. I wish that Smite Priest was a thing. They're not. For me, personally speaking, Smite is S+ tier ability because it's the first ability that I ever cast in World of Warcraft. My first character was a Night Elf Priest, and Smite was the first ability I ever used. So for me, this is very nostalgic, but I mean, it's a C tier ability. Priests are not standing there casting Smite in any kind of viable situation. Soothe Animal, it's like Mind Soothe, even just a bit more useless because there are not as many beast targets in the game as there are humanoids, so it's like a C to D tier ability. Actually, it's like a D tier ability, let's keep it real. Soulfire, it's like Pyroblast, but way worse. Soulfire is like a C tier ability, unless you play some kind of Drake Dog style Deep Destruction Warlock PvP. It's not really useful. C tier. Sprint, A tier ability. I mentioned the dash for the Feral Druid. Sprint is stronger because Rogue does not have other movement speed increases. And also if you talent this, it breaks snares and roots. So yeah, very nice ability. It's like an A tier ability. Starfire, unfortunately, we go back to the Balanced Druid just being kind of a joke. So Starfire, unfortunately, C tier ability. Unless you play a Boomkin, there's really no use to ever use this. You could argue that this is even a D tier ability, but D tier abilities need to be really, really bad. So C tier ability. Speaking of D tier abilities, Star Shards is kind of a D tier ability. It's a priest racial for the Night Elves. It's a channeled spell over 6 seconds. I mean, if you want to say something positive, this is the most mana efficient spell in the game. So that's a bonus. Like mana to damage ratio. It does not get better than this, especially given that after the 6 seconds you get, if you don't go into another channeled spell directly, you get a mana tick, right? But I mean, let's keep it real. It's just not really useful. D tier, maybe C tier. Stealth, I mean, it's like Prowl but stronger. It's iconic for rogues. This is what makes rogues. A tier ability. Stoneclaw Totem. I mean, this might save your life if you play World of Warcraft Classic Hardcore and you play a character that can't die. Outside of that, D tier ability. Stoneskin Totem. It's a bit like all the other flat damage reductions like Curse of Weakness and whatever, kind of boring. C tier ability. Strength of Earth Totem, same thing. Very lame. It's like Grace of the Air, but for strength. It's not an exciting ability. C tier. Summon Charger and Summon Dreadsteed. These are the mount summons for Paladin and Warlock. Obviously, epic mounts themselves are very strong. These abilities don't really add anything to that. You could just use a normal mount, so borderline useless. D tier ability. Same with Summon Fellsteed and Summon Warhorse, obviously. Summon Fellhunter. Quite a useful pet in situations in PvP. You can also use it in PvE if you have to dispel certain things and you don't have a priest, for example. Yeah, as far as demon pets go for Warlock, this is like in the middle. It's like a C tier pet. Summon Imp. I mean, this is the first pet you get and the highest DPS pet you can use. So it's like a B tier pet. Summon Succubus, very strong for PvP because you get to seduce your targets, which gives you an additional CC in addition to your fear. Similar to the Fellhunter, I mean, it's like a B tier pet. I think it's a bit stronger than Fellhunter, generally speaking, because control is better than dispel. And Summon Voidwalker, obviously the strongest one for solo PvE content. The fact that sacrificing Voidwalkers is just so strong in PvP because you get a shield. Also puts us somewhere in the middle as a B tier demon. Sunder Armor, one of the few abilities you actually use as a warrior while leveling. Reducing the armor of your target is very strong, especially if the target is low armor target already. The way that armor works in World of Warcraft is, of course, you have diminishing returns, and since this reduces the armor by a flat amount, the lower the armor of your target already, the stronger this is, the more like physical damage percentages you gain. Very strong ability, A tier. Also the most used ability for tanking, I suppose. So A tier ability. Swipe, unfortunately, it doesn't really scale very well, but it is a beautiful AoE ability for tank druids. I like Swipe. It's like a B tier, right in the middle. Tame Beast, I mean, again, these Hunter Beast abilities are really hard to rank because obviously you need to have a pet. So I can't rank this. Taunt, along with all the other taunts, somewhere between A and B tier. If you take them for granted, I suppose you can't rank them, but yes, I mean, having taunts is just beautiful. Teleport, similar to the portals, just slightly less useful because you can't even use your group mates to go around. It's like, I mean, obviously it's a powerful spell and everyone would love to trade in one of their class abilities in order to gain a teleport, so it's like a C tier ability. Same for Teleport Moonglade, which is the druid version of it, I suppose. Thorns, quite a powerful buff, especially for group content. Putting this onto your tank actually really helps. Yeah, I like Thorns' B tier ability. Thunderclap, not really that useful. Unfortunately, it requires battle stance, so you can't use it in defensive stance, which really sucks for tanking. Yeah, it's like a C tier ability. It's just too expensive. 20 rage is just too much. It doesn't do that much. Tiger's Fury, also kind of a weak ability for the Feral Cat. It's just a lot of energy for flat damage that doesn't scale very well in the end game. I suppose with crit rating it scales, but yeah, it's a C tier ability. Touch of Weakness, one of the weakest priest racials. It's like a C tier ability. Track beasts, demons, dragonkins, elementals, giants, hidden, humanoids, and undead. All of these are, well, actually track hidden is like a C tier ability because it actually gives you stealth detection. That's useful. All the rest, basically D tier abilities. Yeah. I mean, there are situations in PvP where maybe track humanoid or beasts is useful, but some abilities need to be D tier, right? And track is probably as close as it gets. Tranquil Air Totem. It's a bit like giving the Horde the Blessing of Salvation. It doesn't really work that well, again, because of the totem range that you need to maintain. And then you have to kind of get your tank out of that range. It's not even close to Blessing of Salvation. This is like a C tier ability. Tranquility. It's the only Druid AoE heal. Quite strong, given how weak AoE heals in general are. So Tranquility is like in the middle. It's like a B tier ability. Tranquilizing Shot, very, very few uses for this. I mean, you could say this is borderline useless because it's really only a few bosses that you have to use this on, and you get this, you know, for these bosses. So, I mean, it's like a D tier, C tier ability. Travel Form, I mean, this is an S tier ability. Travel Form is incredibly strong for PvP. Just a beautiful ability. Instantly, you get out of polymorphs, you get out of snares, you get out of roots, you travel 40% faster outside, of course. Travel Form is an S tier ability. Just, yeah, incredibly strong. And defining of Warsong Gulch meta, right? So, yeah. Tremor Totem. Unfortunately, the batching can really get the better of this, but that being said, it's still a very useful totem, so I would still give Tremor Totem a B tier. If the batching windows would work more fluently and there wasn't this massive delay between putting a totem down and actually getting the dispel. It's like, there's a good chance that the targets you want to dispel from the fear have ran out of the range of the totem by the time the dispel happens. So yeah, it's still a B tier ability. Turn Undead, one of the weakest CCs in the game. Who cares about fearing undead? It's like Shackle Undead, very few uses for this. C tier ability. Unending Breath, it's like water breathing for the Warlock. C tier ability. Vanish, A tier ability, very powerful for PvP obviously, very powerful for dungeons too. This is basically preventing a rogue from ever dying. Yeah, beautiful ability, A tier. Viper String, also an A tier ability, very strong mana leech here. Arguably the strongest of the stings if you fight someone with mana, so yeah, A tier ability. Volley is horrendous. Volley is somewhere between D tier and C tier, arguably D tier. If you want to do AoE damage as Hunter, just, I mean, multi-shot I suppose. Volley is just not worth sitting there channeling, it's just too weak. Water breathing, same as Unending Breath, C tier. Water walking, also similar, it's like a utility, situational utility spell, it's a C tier ability. Whirlwind, obviously very strong. Warriors switch to Berserker stance to use this all the time. It's like a B tier ability, A tier, B tier ability. Very strong. Wind Fury Totem. It's hard to rank these. Wind Fury weapon is really weak because you don't want to be a shaman that DPSs. Wind Fury Totem, on the other hand, makes like two-handed warriors kind of a valid thing. Very powerful buff for raiding, obviously. So Wind Fury Totem is maybe an A tier ability and Wind Fury Weapon a C tier ability. That might seem contradictory, but I mean, this is the group version and that matters, right? So yeah. Windwall Totem, again, it's like Stone Skin just for ranged, very weak, C tier ability. Wing Clip, I mean, this is like a better hamstring, central to making range as a hunter, A tier ability. Wound Poison, unfortunately this reduces healing by a flat amount, so it does not scale well into the later parts of the game compared to Mortal Strike. So Wound Poison, C tier ability. And then Wrath, obviously, Balanced Druid, somewhere between D tier and C tier, depending on how serious you take a Balanced Druid DPS, somewhere between C and D tier. Okay, and then we have, last but not least, actually, really not least, because some of these are the strongest abilities in the game, the talents. Okay, let's go. Adrenaline Rush, incredibly powerful, cooldown for rogues, double the energy regeneration for 15 seconds, you just melt. If you go into combat, deep combat rogue, you just melt people for these 15 seconds. Very powerful, A tier ability. And just to like preface this, a lot of these spells will be A tier abilities because they are talents, right? So they are, generally speaking, very strong abilities. Aimed Shot, this is more like a B tier ability. I think in TBC or Wrath they add reduced healing, like they make this basically a Mortal Strike, and then it becomes an A tier ability. In Classic, still useful obviously, but more on the B tier level. Amplify Curse, I think the use for this with Curse of Exhaustion is perhaps the most useful one, to gain that extra snare if you need to run away or make a distance. Obviously buffing your curses is powerful, but I mean, it's like a C tier, B tier ability. There's nothing really too exciting about this. Arcane Power, I mean, this is Pom Pyro Mage's ticket to grandeur. Obviously very powerful, kind of a gimmicky ability overall. It's like a B tier, C tier ability. Bestial Wrath, incredibly powerful. Makes your pet immune to pretty much any stuns and snares and whatnot. Your pet already does a truck ton of damage anyway. Increasing it by 50% for 18 seconds every 2 minutes, just incredibly powerful. I will give Bestial Wrath an A tier. Blade Flurry. I'm hesitant to give this an S tier, but boy, it is close. This is like A+ tier. Very, very strong, obviously. Incredibly powerful ability for Rogue. Yeah, A tier, S tier. It's like a better Sweeping Strikes. Yeah, just beautiful. Blast Wave. Also quite strong. The cooldown I think is a bit unnecessarily long. I think giving this like a Cone of Cold cooldown would be just fine. 45 seconds is a bit excessive. It's like a B tier ability. Blessing of Kings, obviously very useful. It's a buff though, an attribute buff, but a powerful one. It's like B tier, C tier. Blessing of Sanctuary, we talked about this, about the Greater Blessing before. Kind of a gimmicky buff because you have to go quite deep into protection to get it. 21 points into protection, that's not really what Paladins do. I mean, it's not that powerful. It's like a C, B tier ability. Bloodthirst, obviously incredibly strong warrior ultimate in the Fury tree. I like that it just deals a percentage of your attack power, because that's what dual wield is all about, right? Dual wield is about multiplying your attack power bonus to your weapons by 2, minus obviously the cut of 50% from your offhand weapon, untalented. So I like that Blizzard made this ability perfectly fit into a dual wield, attack power focused kind of talent tree. Yeah, who doesn't love Bloodthirst? It's an A tier ability. Cold Blood has become kind of gimmicky. 3-minute cooldown for a guaranteed crit is just not really... I mean, assassination in general has kind of become a meme because the stronger the gear has become, the weaker assassination has become. It's like a C, B tier ability. Cold Snap, obviously an A tier ability, incredibly strong. Double Ice Block, double Frost Nova, double whatever you want. Yeah, beautiful ability, double Cone of Cold, whatever it is. Very strong cooldown reducer. So A tier, B tier. Combustion, kind of a B to C tier. Kind of weak for the ultimate in the fire tree compared to something like Ice Barrier, what you get from Frost Tree. So yeah, it's not really that strong. It's like a B tier, C tier ability. Concussion Blow, kind of weak. 5-second stun sounds better than it is. You don't really PvP as a protection warrior, so you have to think of this in a PvE context, and then you can see why this isn't really all that special. It's like a C tier ability. Conflagrate, again, deep destruction. Who does that anymore? It's like kind of gimmicky. It's like a C tier spell. Consecration, obviously necessary for tanking as a paladin. Very mana intensive for the damage it does. It's gonna be really nice in TBC because it's one of the spells that does not get affected by the AoE cap. The 10 target AoE cap you will get with TBC. It's like yeah, it's like a B tier ability. Counterattack, kind of a joke. I mean, Survival Hunter. This is like an ability you use in melee to gain range. Obviously, it's useful in that situation, but I mean, it's like a C tier ability. Curse of Exhaustion, kind of nice. It's the only snare you get as a warlock, so useful. C tier ability. Dark Pact. I wish this would drain life from my pet and return mana. That would be even more in line with the original idea from the Lich hero from Warcraft 3. Kind of useful. If you have like an imp as a mana battery, generally speaking, not that strong. C tier ability. Death Wish, incredibly strong talent. A, if not S tier ability. The drawback of this is so minimal, like resistances and armor reduced by 20%, who cares? You do 20% more fizz damage and you're fear immune, incredibly strong, on a 3-minute cooldown. This is like A tier to S tier ability. Demonic Sacrifice, really weak and really weird talent. You talent all the points into Demonology to then sacrifice your pet? It's like, I never understood the demon tree in World of Warcraft Classic. I don't understand the logic of it. Maybe I'm missing something here. Demonic Sacrifice is like a C, if not D tier ability. The Terrans, very strong. This gives you basically 50% chance of avoidance if you are facing your target. You can't parry if you are not facing your target. Yeah, very, very powerful. But again, it's a hunter melee ability. It's like, why are you dodging or parrying as a hunter? You're in melee, you're dead zoned, you're probably screwed anyway. It's like a C tier ability. Divine Favor. It's a bit like Cold Blood, but the holy light version of it, the healing version of it, kind of weak. I mean, it's nice because it allows you to free cast your highest rank of Holy Light, because you get the mana back if you are a Holy Paladin, right? But outside of that, I mean, it's like a C tier ability, B tier maybe. Divine Spirit, I mean, it's an attribute buff, it's C tier. Elemental Mastery, incredibly strong talent. The way that batching works, it allows you to actually cast 2 spells within the batch of Elemental Mastery, so you get 2 guaranteed crits for 0 mana. Say for example a Chain Lightning plus an Earth Shock. Both will crit, both will cost no mana. Incredibly strong, A tier ability. Fairy Fire Feral, it's like the same as Fairy Fire, just that you get to cast it in feral form, A tier ability. Fel Domination, very useful for PvP, allows you to recast your Void Walker if you want to sack it again. Yeah, very strong ability. B tier ability. Feral Charge, very, very strong. The fact that this is kind of like an intercept, but with a kind of a root afterwards plus a silence is just very strong. Yeah, I like Feral Charge, A tier ability. Ghostly Strike, also very strong ability. It's like a stronger Sinister Strike on a cooldown. Beautiful ability. Unfortunately, Subtlety Rogue, kind of not the strongest to use abilities like that, because you want to have a a slow kind of heavy hitting sword in your main hand rather than a dagger, so there's a bit of a wonky placement of that ability, but generally very strong ability. It's like a B tier. Hemorrhage, similar to Ghostly Strike, it's kind of the better Sinister Strike if you go for a dagger rogue. Nothing too special about this B tier ability. Holy Nova, unfortunately incredibly expensive. AoE heals in general are kind of weak in Classic, and that's fine, but Holy Nova is arguably on the weaker end of even that, so it's like a C tier ability. Holy Shield, even if you are a tank paladin, you don't really use the max rank of this, because all you want this for is the block chance, really. The holy damage you deal can actually be downranked just for the sake of mana preservation. So yeah, I mean, it has its uses. If you want to tank as a paladin, sure. Generally speaking, it's like a C tier ability. Holy Shock, this is also a C tier ability, if not D tier. Really weak. It's the only instant heal spell you get as a paladin, but it's really weak on that front. If you look at the mana cost and the heal you get out of it, this is, I think, the worst mana to heal efficiency in the game. The DPS is ridiculous. Anyway, you're never gonna use Holy Shock to, I don't know, burst down your target, so It's like a C tier ability. Ice Barrier, incredibly strong ultimate for the Frost Tree and for the Mage. Absorb shields in general for casters are just so strong. Ice Barrier is so annoying as a warrior, you don't get any rage. It doesn't get any pushback, can't get daze, it's just incredibly strong. A tier ability. And the same of course goes for Ice Block, incredibly powerful. You get rid of all debuffs on you, you can, you know, it's basically a counter spell because you won't get affected by anything your opponent is casting. A tier ability. Inner Focus, kind of like the Paladin ultimate, you get a free spell. This one adds a bit of crit. It's not really that great. It's like a C tier ability. Insect Swarm, the fact that this counts as a restoration spell makes this a joke. You can't cast this as a Boomkin Druid, which is one of the few instances in which you would bother putting an Insect Swarm on your target to deal some nature damage if you want to play a DPS Druid. 2% chance to hit reduction is just not enough to be worth the... I mean, you use this maybe... No, it's a terrible spell. It's like C tier. Intimidation, very useful hunter ability. Gives you the only kind of planned stun you get as a hunter. You use your pet to do this, which kind of is annoying because of the batching. You usually cast this and then 2 seconds later your target gets stunned, which is fine, but it's a B tier ability. Last Stand, obviously very useful for raiding. Outside of that, not really that interesting. It's like a C tier, B tier ability. Light Dwell, arguably the worst spell in the game. I know that I gave Blizzard the S+ ranking as arguably the best and most powerful spell in the game. Light Dwell gets the D- ranking. This is the worst ability in the game. The fact that this is a talent ultimate is just disastrous. It's a really, really, really bad ability. Useless. D-. Manatide Totem, very useful. Quite the strong, it's like an innovate for your entire party. Of course not as much mana as innovate. But if you actually consider, say, 4 mana users in your party, then it is actually more mana than innovate. So very useful. Unfortunately, it requires you to talent, so it's not as accessible as innovate, but still very useful ability. It's like a B tier ability. Mind Flay is the one spammable shadow spell you have as a priest. I like the snare effect on it. Generally speaking, it's a tier ability just because of how central it is to the Shadow Priest playstyle. Moonkin Form, kind of a joke, and unfortunately that's all I have to say about this C-D tier ability. Mortal Strike, very strong in PvP. In PvE it's kind of not really that used. Two-handed warriors just doesn't scale as well with attack power or gear as one-handers, like dual wield. So it's like a B tier ability. Nature's Grass, very powerful in PvP. Outside of that, not really used. It's like a B tier, C tier ability. Nature's Swiftness for Druid and Shaman. Obviously both are very strong. They give you instant casts. B tier abilities. Omen of Clarity, incredibly powerful buff for feral druids. Yeah, just very strong. A tier ability. Shaman Parry. Okay, we don't have to rate this. Parry is in general a very strong attribute because it not only reduces the melee damage you will take, it actually increases your melee damage because of parry haste. So yeah, parry is nice, but we don't have to rank a talent that gives the shaman the ability to parry. Piercing Howl, the AoE daze for the warrior. Very useful. Yeah, it's very useful. It's like a B tier ability. Power Infusion. I think that's the discipline ultimate for priest. I mean, useful, sure. It's more on the gimmicky side of things. It's like a B or C tier ability. Premeditation. Not that strong. 2 combat points. If you want a PvP, you just use the sep sheep shot macro. Stop auto attacking, so you can, you sep the target, then sheep shot again, then sep, and then you have your combat points on it anyway. It's like a C tier ability. Preparation, very useful, removes all the cooldown on all rogue abilities, obviously very strong. It's like a B tier ability. Presence of Might, kind of gimmicky for Palm Pyro. It's like a C tier ability. Pyroblast, that's the big boy. Again, kind of gimmicky, but it is a viable way to use it in PvP, so there is quite some use to it. Kind of an iconic ability too, this massive boulder of flaming rock. It's like a B tier ability. Repentance. It's a CC, and the only CC next to a Hammer of Justice you get as a Paladin, so that's nice. But that being said, on the level of all CCs in the game, really weak. It's like a C tier ability. Riposte. This is an S tier ability. Riposte, arguably the strongest ability for Rogue. 10 energy for an instant weapon attack, 150% damage that disarms, and it's not even on a global cooldown. Incredibly strong. Just insanely powerful ability. Yeah, S tier. This is arguably one of the strongest melee physical abilities in the game. Sanctity Aura, kind of a gimmick. There are no holy damage DPS classes in the game, unless you want to count Smite Priests or Retribution Paladins. I mean, it's like a C to D tier ability. I know that Retribution's Paladins are like, no dude, this is super good for PvP. Sure, yeah, but I mean, okay, C tier ability. Scattershot, very, very strong ability for PvP. A tier ability, yeah, it's very strong. Seal of Command, as far, see, okay, now I got myself into a trap here. Sanctity Aura is so weak because there are no holy damage no holy damage DPSers, and now I'm saying Seal of Command is the strongest of the DPS seals, so it's a B tier. This is a cool ability. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that this is still a B tier, even if I just said that holy damage is not really a thing. Shadowburn, kind of a gimmick, the same way that Soulfire is. It's Destruction Warlocks is just not really a PvP thing. It's like a C tier ability. Shadow Form, kind of a given if you play a Shadow Priest. Of course it's very strong, it gives you 15% more damage and take 15% less physical damage. This is a bit like Auto Shot, it's really hard to rank because it's just a natural given. If you play a Shadow Priest, you play with Shadow Form. So given how central this is, I guess we have to give this an A tier ability. Shield Slam, I think it's not quite on the level of Mortal Strike and Bloodthirst. It is still obviously a very strong ability. It's like a B tier ability. Silence, very strong for the Shadow Priest. 5-second silence on a 45-second cooldown. Powerful. Unfortunately locked behind talents, but that doesn't really matter for the ranking of the spell. It's like an A tier ability. It's a very strong caster CC spell. Siphon Life. This is what I wish Drain Life would be like. Just give your target an instant dot and then gain life back while you do your other stuff, rather than standing there for 5 seconds channeling a drain spell. I like Siphon Life. It's an A tier ability. Soul Link, obviously incredibly strong for PvP. It's an A tier ability. There's really not much to be said about this. Storm Strike, unfortunately Enhancement Shaman is really gimmicky. This is very expensive mana wise. It's like a C tier ability. Sweeping Strikes, incredibly strong for leveling, for dungeons. Even as a tank, I sometimes go 21 points into arms just to get this. Incredibly strong, A tier ability. Swift Mend, a bit of a gimmick. but useful. It's like a B tier talent. True Shot Aura, not really that special. It's just basically gives attribute buff to your party, some ranged, some attack power for your ranged classes and your melees, but that's about it. It's like a, I don't know, B or C tier ability. Two-handed axes and maces. I mean, it's again one of these abilities that we don't really have to rank. I mean, it's like parry. It gives shamans the abilities to wield certain weapons. There's nothing interesting about this. This is like a C tier talent. Vampiric Embrace. I personally don't enjoy this ability much when I play Shadow Priest outside of PvP, because the global cooldown that you get for putting this on a target plus your Shadow Word Pain already kind of it's too long of an opening. In PvP, obviously, you would use this to get the passive healing. It's like a B tier ability. And the last ability of them all, Wyvern Sting. Unfortunately, very deep in the survival tree. I guess it has its uses in PvP. If you can feign death to get out of combat, you have another CC in addition to your freezing trap. So it's not useless. Yeah, it's like a B tier ability. And that's it. That was all 416 abilities, player abilities in World of Warcraft Classic. I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe you learned something, who knows? If you want to see more of me, you can catch me live on twitch.tv/statics. And I'll see you around, perhaps live next time. Take care, everyone. Bye.